some here too. Mixed seating is not forbidden according to Halacha. And there are many pictures of the Gedolim in America in the 50s and 60s, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rabbi Gifter, Rabbi Bochvai, where there were affairs. There were a mixed seating. Mixed seating is not forbidden. Even at a wedding, mixed seating is not forbidden. What is forbidden is to watch women dancing. That's forbidden by the letter of the law. So once, obviously, if we could separate, and we do try to separate, so then obviously we do. But it's not forbidden. Here, I have to make a Sheva Brachas at my house tomorrow night. There's a Sheva Brachas at my house. When we make a Sheva Brachas, so we do one of two things. Either the men are in my house, and right across the hallway, the women are in the neighbor's house, and then we have a microphone hookup for the speeches. Or even in my house, if it's a smaller group, in my house, we run a mechitza down the middle. Because that's what's accepted. That's the accepted practice here. But it doesn't have to be. By the letter of the law, it's not forbidden. If it's possible to avoid it, it's probably one should avoid it. If it's possible, one should avoid it.
Yeah. For instance, let's say in the Shuvah of Balak, the Shuvah, that there's parents.
It's always it's a good question. It's a very delicate situation, and often you have to allow for that. Okay, listen, the parents have quote unquote suffered enough. With their kid becoming a Baal Tshuva, then they go and subject them to this also. I can't sit with my son at his wedding, that sort of thing. It takes a lot of sensitivity. You have to have a rabbi involved with a lot of sensitivity. And then you get the people who think that they know more than the rabbi, and they're frummer than the rabbi, and they become walking Mr. Magoo's. What I told you, the religious Mr. Magoo's who just create problems. Where no problems need to be created. Do you know that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, when Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky died, so he was living in Muncie, and they were sitting Shiva. Rabbi the Gadol Ador, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, was sitting Shiva, and all of a sudden three nuns walked into the house. So, people a little strange. Nuns walk into the house where one of the Gadol Adors died, and the nuns come into the house, and they said, I'm sure somebody yelled, "Well, we're having none of that." I'm sure some kid in the back probably cracked the joke. But three nuns walk in, and so somebody said, "Sisters, why are you here?" They said, "We live here in Muncie, and every time we walk on the street, we see a religious man, a religious Jew. When he sees us, he's coming towards us. He always crosses the street. He crosses." The rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, never crossed the street to avoid us. He'd always walk right toward us, and he would smile and he'd wish us a warm good morning. Who said you can't say good morning to a nun? Where did you make that up from? A nun. Okay. Who said you can't? Men would cross the street. Okay. Okay. Those were the only crosses. Those were the only crosses they ever saw in Muncie. Men crossing the street. But who said you can't? Who said you can't say good morning to no? Who said you can't be a decent person? And none. What happened to us? Yeah.
So with someone who's not Jewish, and comes from a different background, that's okay, and that's kind of like the thing that you possibly should do to keep the peace. But with a Haredi community, with observant women, you should.
No, they don't exist. Yeah, they don't exist because they don't want you to say hello to them, and that's accepted because they understand it. They understand it. We understand. Everybody understands. We don't talk to the women. There's no what do you call it? I will talk to, if it's an older woman, I'll say good Shabbos. Sometimes I'll stop and schmooze with her. If it's an older woman sitting alone by your house, you have to be a decent human being. You have to be a decent person. If somebody greets you, you can say hello. It's not a what do you call it? You shouldn't sit there making a social hour. But there are certain times just instinctively where you feel this is a decent thing. A woman came to I heard a story. A woman came to a Rav, and the Rav was upset. They had to sit there and talk to a woman, and one of the Gedolim said, "If you're a Rav, and you're not able to speak to a woman, then you're not qualified to be a Rav." That goes with the turf. Women have problems in life also. I just got called by a married woman from America the other day. He had a question on something. And what? She had a problem. That goes with the turf. So you try to keep it, you certainly keep it business-like. A woman in the workforce, for example. A woman in the workforce, she's not allowed to talk to her boss. She is, but where's the line? The line is that all conversation between males and females has to be work-related. She could say good morning, but that's where it ends. It's good morning. There's no, hi, was your weekend? What did you do? No social schmoozing. After that, it's good morning, how are you? Which files do you want me to work on today? What's today's project? All business related. And obviously in a world that we live in today where there's constantly what they call harassment, a constant harassment, whether it's verbal, physical, that sort of thing, from people have guidelines on how to avoid it. And I've always said, any from woman who is in a workforce where there is any form of harassment whatsoever, any form of inappropriate behavior by another male, she has to get a male involved right away. Either her father or her husband if she's married, or her father, because there are a lot of single girls, they graduate seminary, they're working, either her father or her husband, or the best one is her brother who is a college linebacker, right? He's always a good guy to get involved, right? To come in to speak to the harasser and just let him know, I miss the hitting the tackle dummy. I'm looking for some practice. Just keep talking to my sister, right? That should do it, right? That should do it. And if nothing else, you just offer to call the police. Next time you say a word to my sister, we're calling a lawyer. Right? We're calling the police, we're calling a lawyer, and we're going to be a court case. But there has to be somebody. That is the rule. But there's a certain line. There's a certain line of decency. My goodness, you have to be decent people. Oh, you see a little old lady sitting alone, a widow who's sitting by her house all by herself. Say good job. Just talk to her a little bit. A little bit of decency. A little bit of decency. It's got to. We're not religious monsters. It just makes such a bad name. So you have to know where to draw the line. Sometimes a woman sits down next to a frum man on the bus, and he just springs up out of his seat like he's been bitten by a snake. And first of all, according to Halacha, it's not forbidden to sit next to a woman on the bus. It's not forbidden. Let's get clear where the Halacha is. There's no isser. It's not forbidden. Not only that, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was once asked about a guy who rides the subway in New York, and the subways get crowded. I once saw a clip of the Japanese subway. This is really cool. Do you ever see the clip? The guys are wearing gloves, and they just push people into the thing. That's really cool. Now talk about job satisfaction. They just crush people in. You got to see this clip. They push people onto the subway. The Japanese guys are like, such a, and they just, it's like what we had in the Gemara, the uki mamona. Uki mamona, and they just push them out of here. They jam them in. So Moshe Feinstein was asked about the subway in New York. I've never been on the subway. Baruch Hashem. Remind me if I have some spare time not to go there either. But the Moshe Feinstein was asked, what if you're on the subway and people are banging into each other? He says, is it forbidden to get on the subway? He says, no, because it's not your intent and it can't be helped. It's not forbidden. You should try everything you can to avoid it. But you have a parnasa. You got to go to work. It's not your fault that you try to avoid it. If you're the type of guy who's the highlight of your day is riding on the subway, right, and you're looking forward to that, then you shouldn't do it. Then you shouldn't do it. But my goodness, you have to be allowed to live. A person has to be allowed to live, and we have to live as decent people. So it takes a little common sense. Yeah.
But if the laws of Yichud apply even to an old woman, then why should I treat an old woman any differently when I speak to her and greet her?
It's only an instinct. Because an older woman on the street where there's no problem of yichud and it's on the street and nobody in their right mind assumes or thinks anything inappropriate. If it's a young woman, then people are already thinking, and you yourself might be thinking. If it's an old woman, listen. When I was engaged, my wife's grandmother was 95 years old, at a minimum. It wasn't even clear how old she was, but she was at least 95 years old. And she was from Kovna. She had gotten a bracha from Rabbi Elchanan Spector for long life. And she was from Kovna. So I got engaged, and I didn't know exactly what their religious, and I asked the Rosh Yeshiva here, Rav Aaron Feldman, what's the halacha if I meet her the first time, my wife introduces her chassan, and what if she sticks out her hand? Am I allowed to shake her hand? He said no. No. She's 95, guys. She was 95. Nothing was going to happen, right? And she's 95. And he said no, because like you say, we're not allowed to. You're not allowed to shake hands with a woman. That's that. So at the end of the day, it turned out she was firmer than me. She wasn't going to shake my hand. There was no chance. She never even made the move. But at the end of the day, that's a line. But there's a certain decency sense. If a young, attractive girl, you shouldn't be standing there talking to her. It's inappropriate. A married woman, a young married woman, you shouldn't be talking about her. But an older bubby, I had a Rebbe once who was a Hasidic Rebbe. Now this guy was, he was in Chicago. This man, he's not a guy, he was a Rebbe. And he, the way I put it, he never landed in America. He was one of the holiest Jews I ever met in my life. I even remember because he had a brownish car, a brownish Impala, and he was upset because they called it, the manufacturers referred to the color as gold. He said, that's America for you. Everything's got to be exaggerated. It's got to be physical. It's got to be materialistic. It was brown. It's clearly brown. They called it the gold Impala. These are very holy Jew. And he told me that he had a Rebbitzin, and guys, he would invite yeshiva guys over. He understood guys who are in a yeshiva, they're in a dormitory, they need a mama to speak to sometimes. He would let the guy speak to his wife. There was no it wasn't like, they ask questions, talk to her, you need a mama figure. And he was a very, very holy Jew, extremely holy Jew. Extremely, extremely holy. Actually, in a completely different place. But he understood nothing's going to happen, and you have to use a certain, there's a Torah instinct. A lot of people who think they have it don't, right? So if a person isn't sure, they should ask. But there are some people that do. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, he could say good morning to the nuns where nobody else would, right? Because he understood that. You got to be a decent human being. We're not trying to be, again, you got to know where to draw the line. And if you're sitting on a bus, and some sort of female type person with clothing allergies sits down next to you, or worse, I would rather sit next to a woman on the bus. If a woman sits next to me on the bus and I'm tired, and she's a little older, if it's a younger woman, that's not nice, but if it's a little older woman, I have no problem. When they sit right across from me, and you sit on the weather, that's a much bigger problem than sitting next to them. That's a much bigger problem. I once had that happen to me on the bus. I got on, and this woman who I've seen more clothing on a giraffe, and this woman sat right across from me. Clearly, she came in, sat right across from me, and I just got up, and then she immediately took my seat so she could sit forward. She was clearly deflecting me out of there. Yeah, that was clear. That was obvious. Yeah, there's nothing I could do. So I took out my squirt gun and I squirted it. No, just kidding. No, I didn't do that. I should use a taser, right, Jonathan? I didn't, what do you call it? Well, all right, that I can't do. That's Mama Show's a behemoth. I couldn't, what do you call it? It's Mama, it was gross. Okay, that what you can do, but you got to be decent. I remember one woman who wouldn't sit down next to me. It's happened to me a couple of times. Where it's an older woman, she won't sit down next to me. And I said, it's 100. You're allowed to sit down. It's 100%. Don't worry. It's quite all right. It's quite all right. She goes, no. I said, please sit down. It's fine. Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen. It's fine. You can sit down. Yes, Jeff.
Rabbi, I was wondering towards the end of Balak. I know we're moving on, but when Hashem tells.
Yes, Jonathan, yes. When Hashem, we're back to Hashem. Okay, here we go. Back to Hashem. Yeah, go ahead.
When Hashem tells Moshe, kill all the leaders,
yes.
Moshe then downgrades the sentence, to just...
No, he didn't say kill the leaders. That's why if you look at Rashi, he doesn't say kill the leaders. He says take the leaders. It sounds like it from the pasuk. But if you look at Rashi says get the leaders so they could judge the case and kill all the worshipers. It's a very misleading pasuk. Okay. But speaking of immorality, let's go on. Towards the end of the parsha. Okay, I want to finish up Balak today, and we're going to have the single most dramatic act of violence that we find in the Torah. There's a medrash. John, you're gonna like this. There's a medrash. There's somebody, Reb Masya ben Chorosh. Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh he appears in Pirkei Avos. And Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh was sitting and learning, and the Satan spoke to God. He's got a connection. And God said to him, there's nobody, have you seen, look at Ramasya ben Chorosh, there's nobody in the world as holy, as righteous as Ramasya ben Chorosh. So the Satan said, let me test him. God said, there's nobody as righteous, he's never misused his eyes to look at an inappropriate sight in his life. The Satan said, let me test him. So God said, okay. So the Satan dressed himself up as a very provocative woman, and Ramasya ben Chorosh was learning. And he stood in front of him. So Ramasya ben Chorosh averted his eyes, he turned to the right, so the Satan turned to the right. He turned to the left, so the Satan turned to the left. So Ramasya ben Chorosh said to his attendant, bring me 2 nails and a bed of coals. And so he brought him the nails and the bed of coals. He heated up the nails, red hot, and he poked his own eyes out with the red hot coals. The ancient version of laser surgery. Right? Okay? And the Medrash says that even the Satan, who'd basically seen it all, the Satan was stunned. So the angel, the Satan was like, whoa, right? And he was, and you notice, by the way, I noticed about the Medrash, he wasn't taking any chances. He didn't just use nails. He wanted to make sure nails were red hot. Nails alone work, but he made them red hot in the coals. 1 second. So then the Medrash says that the angel Raphael said, God said to the angel Raphael, okay, go down and cure him. So the angel Raphael came down and he said, okay, he said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm here to cure you. He said, forget it. What's done is done. So he said, okay, I guarantee you you'll never be tested in this area again. He says, okay, if that's the case, then I'll allow you to cure me. So the angel Raphael cures, they lived happily ever after. Okay? Now, take a look. Take a look. That's what the Medrash says. Now, guys, listen. I don't want to hear tomorrow that anybody comes walking with a patch over their eye. You know what happened. Well, Kaplan said. Don't. What do you call? Hold all the questions. Hold all questions. Take a look on page 874. So Bilam fails on all counts, and Balak says to Bilam, Amscray, get out of here. You failed. There's nothing you can do for me. He keeps blessing the Jewish people. Now, if you take a look at Perik Chaf Dalet, sorry, 868. Okay, I want to show you something remarkable here. I don't remember if we did this last time. I don't think we did this last time, but take a look at 878, 2 lines from the bottom. Vayisa Bilam eseinav, Bilam raises his eyes. Vayares Yisrael shochen lishvatov. 868. Sorry, did I say 878? 868. I get 6s and 7s mixed up still. 868, 2 lines from the bottom. Vayisa Bilam eseinav, vayares Yisrael shochen lishvatov. Bilam raises his eyes, and he sees the Jewish people dwelling according to their tribes. Vatihi alach v'ruach Elokim. The Spirit of God rests on him, and then in the next on Pasuk Hey, he goes to the famous line, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov mishkenosecha. So how beautiful are our tents, Yaakov, your dwelling place is Yisrael. So if you look at Rashi back on Pasuk Beis, it's on 868, left column, 5 lines from the bottom. Okay? 3 lines from the bottom. If you find it, please show the person next to you. 868, left column, 3 lines from the bottom. Shochen lishvatov. He saw them dwelling. What did he see that he was so impressed by? Ra kol shevet v'shevet shochen la'atzmo. He saw each tribe dwelling alone. Ve'enan me'oravin. They weren't mixed together. Ra she'ein pischein mechuvanim zeh keneged zeh. He saw that the entrances of the tent were not facing each other. Did somebody mention this? Did you hear about this on Shabbos? Their tent entrances weren't facing each other. Now I want to ask you a question. Imagine, I live over here. That wall is a bay window. That entire far wall is a bay window from my living room. Or a side of my house. Doesn't matter. I got a big window there. There's an empty lot next to me. And then somebody buys the empty lot, and they build a house, and they build a window right opposite my window. There's a window right opposite. Well, how would you feel about that? Not too good. Why?
It's not sneeze.
Speak.
You can see into what other people are doing.
Yeah.
No privacy.
For whom?
Either one of you, really.
What would be bothering you? What bothers you most?
Your own privacy.
Of course. I don't want this guy with the bay window looking into my, what do you call? The guy, next thing I know, but I had a call from my neighbor, put down the chocolate bar. You're not always, you ate lunch at 1 o'clock. You're not always Fleischig yet. My neighbor will call me up because he's tracking me. Where's my privacy? What, you got to walk around the house with, you got to put on, you look, nobody wants to be watched and followed. Nobody, no invasion of privacy. So Bilam sees the tents are facing each other. But look what Rashi says. What is it? Why is it their tents? I don't want my tent facing you. I don't want your entrance facing my entrance. I don't want you looking in my house, right? That's not what Rashi says. Look at the next line of Rashi. He saw their entrances don't face each other. That he shouldn't peek into the other guy's tent. That means the concern of the Jewish people was not that. What was their first concern? That a guy shouldn't invade my privacy? Their first concern is not to invade the other guy's privacy. That's what Bilam sees. That's what it impressed with. If it's to not invade their own privacy, that everybody in the world doesn't want. But he realizes that the Jewish people are doing it. How he realized, I don't know. But he realizes that the Jewish people are doing it because they want to avoid looking into the other guy's house. So that in and of itself tells you something about Jewish people. But what's really remarkable is, remember we said about Bilam that he suffers from jealousy. Bilam suffers from every negative trait. He's jealous of everybody. What is the nature of a jealous person? A jealous person is always looking at other people. You're always looking at what's going on by the other guy. What kind of car is he driving? What's he got in his house? Bilam, it cannot fathom the idea that there's a whole nation that actually minds their own business. That nobody's living in the other guy's house. That's what's impressive over here. So Bilam is like, wow, that is something. Okay, now, it's just an interesting thing. And then you look at Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkanosecha Yisrael on the next page, 3 lines from the top. Rashi points out the same thing again about the tents not facing each other. But I saw a beautiful shot. Literally the words mean, how beautiful are you, how good are your tents, Yaakov, your dwelling places, Yisrael. But I saw, who is called Beis Yaakov? Who's Beis Yaakov referred to? The women. That's why the girls' schools are called Beis Yaakov. It's based on the Torah. It's based on the Torah. Ko Somar le Beis Yaakov. Moshe Rabbeinu said, say this to the women. Beis Yaakov is the women, and V'sagei levnei Yisrael, and the Yisrael is the men. So Yaakov is a lower level, right? Is outranked by Yisrael. Yisrael is the primary name. So the women are the second in command. Yaakov is Yisrael. However, they're called Beis Yaakov. That's the Beis Yaakov movement, the school movement. The movement was called Beis Yaakov for that reason. So the Mefarshim say over here, the Gemara asks, how do women get, men study Torah, how do women get rewarded? Where is the reward for women? How do women earn their reward? Other than raising children and taking, so the Gemara says because they take their children off to cheder, and they wait for their men while their men go off to yeshiva. In the old days, they used to go off to yeshiva. Yeshiva wasn't just a summer program. It wasn't just a JLE, for 4 weeks. In the old days, they used to go off to yeshiva for either 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, 12 years, 24 years for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was on his way home and he heard a guy hassling his wife. He's standing by the door after 12 years. And this guy's saying, hey, you poor lady, your husband left you a living widow. She said, well, if it's up to me, he'd go back for another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva's right by the door and says, ooh, I got permission. Let's go, boys. Right? He turns around and off he goes. Hey, go in, have a piece of kugel, something. No, he turns right around, and off he goes, back to 24 years. So the women waited, men used to go away. The Gemara says that Rava sent his son off to yeshiva for 6 years. And after 3 years, on Erev Yom Kippur, he heard a rumor his son's heading home for Yom Kippur to say hello. So Rava took a club and he went out to greet his son. And they met on the road. He said, what happened? You got homesick? Right? And Gemara says, in those days, I listen, what are you're quitting in the middle? What is this? That's a serious business. Okay, it has to be understood exactly what's going on. The Gemara says they got into an argument. Neither of them ate the last meal. They went into Yom Kippur fasting. They didn't even eat the suda because they were busy out there when Rav went. But it's a listen, you go off to yeshiva, and those is serious business. The women get the reward for being home and waiting for their husbands. That's what it says. So it says over here, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, how good are your tents, Yaakov? Because you have the women who are Yaakov, base Yaakov. They take care of the home, they raise the kids, they create an environment for the husband. Therefore, Mishkenosecha Yisrael, the dwelling places, the base medrash, where men are studying Torah, that's the woman's share. It's because what she does in the home, I recommended all the guys this Shabbos. I said this at the Shabbos table. My wife liked that for it. How do you like that? You got to know which ones to say, at the Shabbos. So the what do you call it? The women get the credit for the men's learning. Okay, now go back to the end of the Parsha. Okay, because this needs to be understood. Bilam heads home. The curses don't work, and he then gives Balak one last piece of advice. He says, listen, the God of the Jewish people hates immorality. And there's a statement, by the way, that says, there's nothing that God hates more than people who walk around undressed in public. There's nothing God hates more than people walk around. Again, it's appalling the way people walk around. God hates that. And the Jewish people, Bilam says to Balak, the God of the Jewish people detests immorality. What I suggest you do is trap the Jewish people, set a trap for them, send out the Moabite Midianite girls, and the Medrash says hold for a few minutes. What the Medrash says that what they did was they set up these tents with an old lady on the outside and a nice looking girl on the inside, and the Jewish men would come there and they would offer, the old lady would offer to sell them something, and the young lady would undercut the price. Then they'd go into the tent and she'd give them wine and get them all fired up. And then at a certain point, the man would solicit the girl, and she'd say, first, bow down to the idol, serve my idol. And so they were guilty of idol worship and immorality. Okay, now this was all the idea of Bilam. Now look what happens here. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashitim. The Jewish people dwell in Shittim, 874, fourth line. Jewish people dwell in a place called Shittim. And Shittim comes from the word shoteh, which is foolishness. They behave foolishly. Vayochel ha'am liznos el benos Moab. They started sinning with the Moabite girls. So they invited them to worship their gods, and they got involved with Baal Peor. And then, skip down to Pasuk Vav. V'hinei ish mi bnei Yisrael ba. A Jewish man came along. Vayakrev el ishta vesa Midyanis. Takes a Midianite woman. We'll find out next week's Parsha who this man is, the head of a tribe, Shlumiel ben Surishadai, Zimri. And he takes his Midianite Cosby as the daughter of a Midianite king. And the king told her, go to the Jewish people, I want you to cause their leader to sin. So Zimri, who's the head of the tribe of Shimon, he grabs her, and she said, my father said I'm supposed to go. He said, I'm a leader also. And she's a Midianite. La'ene Moshe, they call Adas b'nei Yisrael. He grabs her in front of Moshe and all the Jewish people. They're all crying. And Zimri, the Rashi brings down the Medrash. He came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, hey, she's a Midianite. Is she permissible or she's not permissible? If you tell me she's not permissible, why are you allowed to marry a Midianite? Moshe married a Midianite girl, Tzipporah. So this is one of those Jewish questions. You notice he wasn't waiting for an answer. Is she permissible or she's not? And if she's not permissible, so wait, that was a statement. So he takes her and he goes into a tent. And they're not discussing philosophy. So Zimri goes into a tent and he's committing an act of immorality. Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas sees what's going on. Vayaka mitocha eda. He gets up. Vayikach romach biyado. He takes a spear. Now, Rashi brings down that Pinchas consulted Moshe Rabbeinu. And he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, my grandfather's brother, because Pinchas was the grandson of Aaron HaKohen, he said, Grandpa's great uncle, didn't you teach us when you came down from Har Sinai that somebody who's consorting with a non-Jewish woman, you're allowed to, anybody who's vigilant for the sake of God is allowed to kill them? Didn't you teach us that halacha? And it's not a halacha that you publicize, somebody has to come up with it. It's halacha ve'in morim kain. That means if somebody consults, then you say yes, but the Beis Din doesn't go and tell people to do it. It has to be somebody who's burning with zeal for God. Now Pinchas says, didn't you teach us that halacha? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Karaina deigra sa'iu lahave pargabanka." The guy who brings the guy who delivers the message, he should carry out the contents of the letter. So Pinchas takes the initiative. Now, I want to ask you a question. First of all, before anything, we'll see in a second. So he takes the spear. Now it says what he did was he took off the head of the spear and he walked like with a cane. He took he took off the blade and he walked with a cane and he walked over to the tent and he said to the guys around the tent from the tribe of Shimon, he says, "How come? Who said you? What makes you think we're holier than you are? I also want to go in there." They said, "Ooh, good. The Frummies are coming aboard also, right? The Frummies, the Prushim are also involved." So Pinchas goes in, and now he goes. Vayavo achar ish Yisrael el hakuba. He goes into the tent. How did he translate it into the tent? Yeah, tent. Vayidkar es shneim. He stabs both of them while they're in the act. He stabs them both to death. Es ish Yisrael ves ha'isha el kavasa. He nails them. Very, very embarrassing situation because he puts them on the end of the spear. And it says that there were 6 miracles that happened to Pinchas and when this took place. Number 1, the spear didn't break. Number 2, they didn't separate. Number 3, the halacha that the guy's doing this, if Zimri would have stopped what he's doing and turned around, he could have killed Pinchas. Because Pinchas is a pursuer. Because he's taking permissible vigilante action, but that's only while they're doing the Avera. And then the doorpost left, and he comes marching out with both of them on the end of a spear, and that's got to be pretty embarrassing. And he parades them around the Jewish people to show them that he didn't kill them for nothing. Yeah, that's a woe. Okay? Now, and then that put an end to the plague. Now, the question here is, and then we'll see next week. We'll see tomorrow what his reward is. But we'll see. He gets the Nobel Peace Prize, right? He gets the Nobel Peace Prize for this. Now in the world we live in today, you got pacifists. That's terrible. You go and you spear them. What should he have done? How about a little dialogue? And everybody's into dialogue, right? That's a dialogue. Why'd you talk to him? Wait till tomorrow, come after shul and say, "Hey, Zimri, that's not right." A little dialogue. Right? So it was a dialogue. Yeah, he said they're going to die, and it's going to be for a long time. That's what we call a dialogue. Yeah, it wasn't dialogue; it was dialogue. That means that there are certain times in life that people need to be stabbed. Now, by the way, guys, we can't do this nowadays. Nowadays, we cannot do this. No vigilantes nowadays. Even if it means throwing stones at cars on Shabbat, you can't do that. And you can't derail trains because you don't want them running through your neighborhood or whatever the case is. Nobody called today. But there's a concept of somebody who is, and it's got to be 100%, by the way. If Zimri Pinchas is 100% motivated for the honor of God, that's why he's allowed to do it. If it's 99%, I'm killing him because he's doing something wrong. And 1% is because he owes me $20. Right? The no good Nick. Yeah. Then he's a murderer. He's just he's a plain murderer. He's 100% doing it to serve God. Now, I want to ask you a question. It's the single most violent act we find anywhere in Torah. I want to ask you a question. Rashi brings on, I want to see it inside. Where left column, 6 lines from the bottom. Vayar Pinchas. Pinchas sees what happened. Left column, 6 lines from the bottom. Says Rashi, Ra Maisa v'nizkar halacha. He saw what was going on. Remember the halacha. Amar lo Moshe. He said to Moshe, Mikublani micha, I have a tradition from you. Haboel aramis, one who's consorting with a non-Jewish woman, kanoim pogimbo. Didn't you teach us that in such a case, people vigilant could strike them down? Amar lo, karaina digr sayuleve barvanka. Whoever thought of it, you carry it out. That's the halacha. I want to ask you guys a question. Moshe came down from Har Sinai, and he taught the Jewish people the entire Torah. taught it to Aaron, then he taught it to Aaron's sons, and they taught it. They had a whole system teaching them the entire Torah. Now I understand if Pinchas would come over to Moshe, and he'd say to Moshe, "Remember when you came down from Har Sinai, you were teaching us about Shomer Shemasar LaShomer." You know, I didn't get that sugya 100% clear. You know, the Tchilosa b'pshia v'sofa ba'ones. You know, I wasn't sure exactly. We passed like Rav Yochanan, and it wasn't clear. You know, I'm sure when Moshe taught the halacha of killing people while they're committing an act of immorality, nobody fell asleep in Shir that day. I guarantee you, everybody was on board. Great content, you know, great excitement, you know. Yeah, this is, I don't understand. Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm sure, was an excellent teacher, and I'm sure Pinchas was a great student. So why is he asking, what, Moshe, didn't you teach us that when a guy's doing this, you could stab him to death? And it's not like asking about Migu. You know, what was it? We paskin? Yeah, it is. He has a chazaka. It's Shema. You know, why is he asking? This itself is a lesson. If you ever got an idea to do anything dramatic for the good of the cause, for God's honor, go ask somebody. Just ask somebody. Pinchas asked. You could ask. Right? If you ever see something, you know how many times I've been asked over the years by guys here? I've been asked numerous times over. You guys have said to me, should we go downtown and beat up missionaries? Guys have asked me that all the time. So what have I said? What do you think the answer is?
No.
The answer is, let's go! No. That's not the answer. The answer is, guys, if it's important to go beat up missionaries, Rav Samet would be out there leading the charge, right? If it's really something that needs to be done, there are bigger people who would be out there leading the charge. Since they're not, then you just go into the base medrash and open up a Gemara and a Mishnayos and a Tosfos, and you stay here. You want to do a mitzvah? That's a mitzvah. That's your mitzvah. So it's a rule. It's a life rule. Don't do anything dramatic. You know, let big people do dramatic things. I got to tell you this story, guys. This is completely off subject. I got to tell you, it's unbelievable. In 1970, when they had the hijacking, when they hijacked the 3 planes to the to the Jordanian desert. Are you familiar with the incident? Sure, the three planes were hijacked. One of the people on the planes was Rav Hutner, who was the Gadol Ador, who was there. They were there for, I forgot, about 3 weeks. They were good. There was a kid from Chicago who was also on the plane. There was a girl. I'm surprised you haven't heard it. There was a 1970 or 1971, and eventually they blew up the planes. And then they took the people off. They blew up 3 planes. They hijacked them from different places. They landed in Jordania. They're doing Black September. So they started killing each other, and they left the Jews alone, and they all made it out. Okay, there was a girl who had been on the plane, and she came back also with the hijack, with the what do you call it, with all the hostages. She was released. When she got back to America, the next day, one of her best friends was getting married. And she was exhausted, worn out, emotionally drained from the ordeal. She said to her mother, listen, but, you know, for the sake of the mitzvah of bringing joy to Akala, I'm gonna go, you know, push myself, and I'm going to go to the wedding. Her mother said to her, you're not going to the wedding. You know why? She said, because at a wedding, the star of the wedding, the main attraction, is supposed to be the Kala. If you go to the wedding, everybody's going to be flooding you. Everybody's crowding around. It's going to take the attention off the Kala, and therefore you're not going to go to the wedding. Right? Amazing story. It's one of the best stories I've heard in years, because it just shows you, we always, you know, well, I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to go to the chasna. No, if you go to the chasna, you're the villain. You're not the hero. That means sometimes the hero, John, is the guy who stabs people while they're doing Averas. That's a hero. So you got to know who the hero is. And sometimes you're the villain. Here, that's an amazing story. Is that an amazing story? The mother, even the more amazing story, the girl listened to her mother. Now that's really amazing. She did what her mother told her. That's also amazing. The story is an unbelievable story. My daughter told me this story. She had heard it at a shiur last week from somebody, and my daughter told me the story Friday night, and I was amazed. It was also after 3 cups of wine, so it was particularly amazing. But it was what I was very, very, very impressed. Very impressed. Somebody's thinking, you know, what are you doing? You want to do the mitzvah? Think about what the real mitzvah is here. What's the real thing you should do or not do under the circumstances? Amazing. All right. See you tomorrow, guys.